Welcome back. So the national head of the Directorate for Priority Crime Investigation, Godfrey Lebeya, presented the stats for the fourth and final quarters of the financial year. Now, during his briefing, Lebeya outlined the progress and also assessed the milestones achieved by the Hawks in the past year. He gave an update on the VBS scandal, and he assured the country that the State Capture National Investigation Task Team is concentrating on conducting thorough investigations. Lebeya also touched on the Steinhoff crash, which wiped more than 200 billion rand off the South African Stock Exchange, or the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, rather. Well, to help us make sense of all the numbers that were presented and progress of high-profile investigations, we are joined by IRS Forensics Investigator for Organised Crime, Chad Thomas. Of course, IRS being a private investigation organization. Chad, good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. I think let's start here. You watched that briefing, of course, and I wonder if you were convinced that real progress is being made in high-profile cases. So was it a confidence-boosting presentation that we saw? I think your mic is off, Chad.
No, my mic is on. Can you hear me? No, my mic is on.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Look, the Hawks are in a very unenviable position where they are tasked with investigating priority crime. And we talk about these high-profile crimes such as state capture, VBS, Steinhoff, but we talk about them in isolation to the reality on the ground, where the Hawks are also expected to investigate a massive increase in kidnappings, ATM bombings, cash in transit heists, murder for hire, and it's becoming overwhelming. We heard that over 500 people have been arrested in the last quarter. We heard that upwards of 29 people been arrested for state capture, over 30 people been arrested for VBS. But one must understand that the Hawks are not operating at full capacity. In fact, they're most probably only operating at around 50% of their required capacity. And of that, only 1,500 members are actually investigating officers or detectives. Now, if you look at a police force of 150,000, that means 1% of our police force, because the Hawks form part of the police force, are actually tasked with investigating the majority of serious crimes out there. So although the Hawks are making progress, they're making progress under very difficult circumstances. And we need to actually start unbundling what they are investigating and start looking to other units to assist them. For example, the Investigating Directorate, which is now known as IDAC, the Investigating Directorate Against Corruption, should be responsible for the state capture investigations, prosecutions, negotiations for deferred prosecutions, etc. But they are using members of the Hawks that are seconded to them, and they are using prosecutors seconded to them from the Specialized Commercial Crimes component of the NPA. Those members are now having to dedicate themselves to investigating these state capture crimes, and their other dockets are now having to be picked up and run with by other members who already are overwhelmed with the sheer volume of cases they have. Yeah. So watching the Hawks give that report, a lot of good came out of it, but the figures are a drop in the ocean compared to the amount of crime that actually is being committed in South Africa and what the ratio is to arrests and convictions.
Yeah, so I want to actually just play a clip from what Lebeya actually said while speaking to the channel after that very briefing that speaks to the capacity, of course, that you're talking about, right, and the sheer numbers that they have. All right, do we have that clip? If we can play it. But in it, he talks about just the sheer massive amount of affidavits that really the police are and authorities are dealing with. Here it is. Let's take a look at this.
If you count the number of affidavits that we say we have recorded, you will understand that there is mammoth task that needs to be done here. One statement is not just a matter of a few minutes and then you are finished with the statement. You will see that it is pages of affidavits that we have to be packaging. One affidavit, some of them are more than 10 pages. And some, if I can hint from the VBS, one statement we had to take more than 30 days. But I think when these statements are presented in court, hopefully some of the legal minds will be able to ask questions and see how long this statement is. So it takes time to do this. 2,000 statement is a lot of work that has been done.
Yeah, very interesting, right? I mean, talks about just the sheer amount of work that goes into some of these investigations and I suppose the capacity issue being a big one. But Chad, I want to talk about this because he's touched on VBS, and one of the things that we heard yesterday is that a total number of 33 VBS arrests have been affected. Talk to me about, I suppose, the process of investigating a matter like VBS. And the reason why I ask that is because you speak to investigative journalists in South Africa that have been able to even, paint us, I suppose, a trail of how monies have moved. It speaks to quite a network. So what goes into an investigation like VBS, for instance?
It's a very important question. When one looks at VBS, the fact that people have now been arrested, it means that the matter is going to be enrolled in court and eventually set down for trial. The Hawks have a principle that they operate by, and that's investigate and then arrest. So they will only arrest once they believe there's sufficient evidence to support the allegations against the accused. Now, when one looks at the State Capture Commission, for example, a lot of what was said there is not evidentiary. It has to be turned into evidence. When you're looking at depriving somebody of their liberty, because that's what happens when somebody's imprisoned, the burden of proof is far more difficult for the state than in, say, for example, a civil matter or a commission of inquiry that's looking for findings and recommendations.
Yeah.
There, they're looking on a balance of probability, whereas in a criminal case, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, because as I pointed out, somebody could be deprived of their liberty for many, many years. When you're investigating a complex financial crime, you need to follow the money. You want to try obtain financial restitution through restorative justice, and you have to follow the money wherever it went. And when one looks at the sheer volume of bank accounts that have to be subpoenaed, and then on those bank accounts, you see other accounts that funds were transferred into, so you have to subpoena those contra accounts. Then you find funds went overseas, and you have to contact the foreign law enforcement agencies and establish a mutual legal assistance treaty called an MLAT. You then start realizing how difficult it is from an administrative perspective to investigate and prove the allegations. It's very easy to allege. It's far harder to prove. Now, when you look at bank statements and you look at the complexities of money laundering and the layers that take place in the money laundering process, you could be talking about hundreds of bank accounts in dozens of jurisdictions around the world, and you could be talking about tens to hundreds of thousands of bank statements that then need to be analyzed by the law enforcement agencies. They then have to take those findings, put it into a financial flow analysis, and they have to make it admissible for court purposes. And therein lies a massive problem, because it is exceptionally time-consuming, and the DPCI, the Hawks, don't have as many financial flow analysis as they require to undertake these mammoth tasks.
Yeah, we've talked VBS. Let's talk about state capture for a moment, because apologies, what we heard from Godfrey Lebeya yesterday is that 27 arrests were made relating to state capture. That brings the total of arrests to 33, 400 million rand in recovered monies, also what he talked about. And I wonder if, the State Capture Commission certainly wasn't last year. One wonders if the capacitating even of state capture investigations is a political issue.
Look, we had a backlog of cases pre-COVID. COVID created a massive problem because multiple cases weren't enrolled, police stations were closed, courts were closed. You then had the added issue of PPE fraud that came out of COVID. And all these members are investigating these kind of high-profile dockets. There does seem to be political will to continue with the state capture investigations, but that's why they've created the investigating directorate. And the state needs to look at investing in these specialized units and look at it as a return on investment, because 400 million is a drop in the ocean compared to what was actually taken out during the state capture years. When one looks at the sheer volume of fraud and corruption that was perpetrated on our country, 400 million is a slap in the face. We can get a lot more money back if they take the time and effort to capacitate and ensure that these units have the correct resources.
Yeah.
When you look at the investigating directorate, when they were originally established, they were only given a budget of 100 million per annum. That subsequently increased to about 350 million rand per annum.
Yeah.
But the more they capacitate these units, the more they invest in these units, the more they can get back into the coffers. We have a fund called the Kara Fund, which is where all the monies that have been forfeit to the state, either through civil or criminal forfeiture, are kept. So these could then be used for social upliftment programs, as well as to assist in capacitating units such as the Hawks, as well as the ID and other law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, then I'm wondering where you've got a complex matter like the Palapala farm scandal, for instance. I mean, the work that's necessary there for some answers and you know, to really come to light. I mean, Lebeya essentially saying that matter is still under investigation. Timeframes on when there could be answers on Palapala?
It's a very interesting dynamic that it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. We can see that with Palapala, there's a lot of people riding on it from a political perspective. It's almost become the Nkandla of the Ramaphosa period of time that he's been in power. We had Nkandla with Zuma, now we've got Palapala with Ramaphosa. And something does have to happen in that matter. Otherwise, it's going to continue to haunt him, and it's going to haunt his administration. So we do need to see a clear indication from the state what is going to happen with Palapala. And that's the type of matter that should actually be referred to the Investigating Directorate, or IDAC, to investigate.
You know, I also just want to talk about just how safe or unsafe it is that these investigations are taking place, and just, I suppose, the safety of the investigators themselves. I mean, one of the things that he highlighted was that in January this year, a Durban Hawks TRC investigation team member was found with head injuries and a gunshot and stab wounds in an open field, dead in Tsakani Extension 19. So can we talk a little bit about whether or not we need to also be planning to protect the investigators?
Look, that was a very important point that he raised. I was very happy to see that he started his statistics and his feedback by speaking about police killings and the inroads being made there. And he made specific mention that an attack on a police officer is an attack on the state. We see far too many police officers being killed, as well as security officers that are acting in support of the police or involved in cash in transit assignments and projects. And we're seeing that our criminals have become very emboldened, they've become very callous. We know that the statistics are horrific when it comes to the detection of criminals involved in heinous crimes such as murders and rape. We're talking about a 10 to 12% conviction rate of murderers. That means that around 9 out of every 10 murderers still walk the street. The statistics for rape are even more horrific. We're talking about a 5% of all reported rapes leading to a successful conviction. That means that if these heinous crimes can pass unprosecuted, your normal opportunistic criminal feels a lot more emboldened to escalate in what he does. And that's what we've seen over the last few years. We've seen people now hearing about kidnapping being so lucrative that we now have express kidnappings. Kidnappings that were just for the rich and famous, we now seen people being kidnapped off the streets for a couple of thousand rand. Our criminals are definitely being emboldened. And one of the things that emboldens them even more is the fact that they can stand up to the police because they've got so much firepower, and they can actually take on the police and kill police officers in cold blood. And it's very important that these task teams that have been established come with the necessary results. And that was one of the things that General Lebeya pointed out from the outset of his presentation yesterday. Police killings are taken exceptionally seriously. It's an attack on the state, and these task teams are taking down the guys that are responsible for this.